Good afternoon, everyone. I hope things are going well. They're certainly lively, at least for some of us. Let me introduce our speakers so we can get right to it. So to my left, not politically, but just, is Arthur Levine, the sixth president of the Woodrow Wilson Foundation. Before that, he was president of Teachers College. He also taught at Harvard and was president of Bradford College. He's written a very great deal over a very long career. The first book I read of Arthur's was Why Innovation Fails in 1980, when I was in high school. His most recent book is Generation on a Tightrope, which is about college students. He's also made some quite controversial statements about schools of education, which is why I asked him here today, because controversy and discussion is a good thing. He's had Carnegie, Guggenheim, and Rockefeller Fellowships. He holds 25 honorary degrees. He and his wife Linda have a daughter who has just become a tenure-track professor, so I know that Arthur has more than an armchair interest in how our institutions do and what about tenure. Now, Sharon Robinson is President and Chief Executive Officer of the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Education. AACTE incorporated in 1948, and in my first write-up of this I had written, and Sharon has been president since then, but actually that's not true. She has been president since 2005, because it would make her about 90 if she were in 1948. Dr. Robinson has also been president of the Ed Policy Institute of ETS and was Assistant Secretary of Education for what we once knew as OERI and now goes under the moniker IES. Her bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees are from the University of Kentucky, and she holds an honorary doctorate from the University of Louisville, if I got that right. She's a lifelong civil rights activist and has really focused AACTE on its ability to help teachers maximize their potential, especially when it comes to those who are disadvantaged. Obviously, most of those teachers are trained in schools of education, so I'm assuming she'll have particular points to make about what our schools should be doing. Now, Kent Mcguire and I have a long history, albeit from a distance. Kent was a program officer at the Pew Endowment, and I was able to get a grant from him to do some research when I was a relatively young faculty member. I'm not sure if it was because of it, but as soon as I got the grant, Kent left the foundation and became an assistant secretary in the U.S. Department of Education in the Clinton administration. I subsequently got a grant from OERI. Kent then left the Clinton administration and was a professor and dean of the College of Education at Temple University. I wanted him to hold on to that position, so I stayed away from Temple. In the meantime, I hired a postdoc at the University of Southern California, who then went to Michigan State, and as postdocs tend to do, he stayed in touch with me and finally decided to go to the Southern Education Foundation. Shortly after James arrived, he informed me that the foundation would be getting a new president, Kent Mcguire. The Southern Education Foundation focuses on public policy and educational practice. Again, I felt that Kent's background as a dean and now president of a foundation gives him a superb platform to think about the future of schools of education. And, you know, certainly I have picked up in a bunch of the sessions, schools of education are in a bit of trouble right now. And what's our future? Where should we be where are we heading and where should we be heading? And that's really the nature of this conversation. I have asked each speaker to talk for about 5 minutes or so about what they're thinking. No PowerPoints, no formal discussions, and then I have a few questions to get us started, and then we'll open it up for questions and debate. So why don't we have Arthur start?
Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, as the introduction was being offered to me, all I could think about was, God, this guy is old. In point of fact, I got a phone call when I was going to be out here, and it was from Josie Bass. And they said they really wanted to celebrate with me. And I said, how come? And they said, this is the 40th anniversary of the first book you ever published. I really was only 24, I swear, but that's true. 40 years. And one more correction. It was said that I have 25 honorary degrees. I actually have 26 if you count my undergraduate diploma. Okay. I want to begin with a bias. And it's this. I think the best place to prepare teachers, school leaders, and educators of all sorts is the university. I have 4 reasons. 1, capacity. We're preparing 90% of all those people. It's the Willie Sutton principle. Why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is. Second, we're self-sustaining. If you can create change at a university, then what happens is that people pay tuition to attend it, as opposed to having put money in it year after year after year after year, simply to sustain it. Third, we're the home of the disciplines, not simply education, but the arts and sciences, law, business, and the other fields that are germane to what we do. Fourth, the data that compares ed schools with alternatives doesn't lead me to believe that one's better than the other. And I guess my fifth is, Woodrow Wilson has been working in 5 states to change teacher education. And the fact of the matter is, universities are creating brand new teacher education programs that meet the needs of the present. Okay, having said that, what I'd say to you is, we need to imagine a new future for education schools. Not simply because of the growing criticism, not simply because of the proliferation of alternatives and competitors, not because ed schools did anything wrong, but the world changed. Economically, demographically, technologically, and globally, at a pace and scale we've never before experienced. And the consequence is that no matter what our programs, the present and the future require new efforts from us. And it's not just us. It's true of every social institution in the country. We are moving from a national, analog, industrial economy to a global, digital information economy. Every one of our social institutions was created for the former, whether it's ed schools or universities or schools or government or healthcare or media or finance. And every one of them now seems to be broken. They're not working. We look at all the others and we say, boy, they're in terrible straits, but so are we. And what's going to happen is every one of them needs to be refitted for a new society. And it's going to happen in 2 ways. And we have a choice here. We have the choice of repairing the existing institutions or having them replaced. Both are going on at the same time. It's particularly true with education schools. 8 forces, given that I only have 10 minutes, I'm going to abbreviate all of this. 8 forces are likely to have profound impact. The first is demographics. We're going to lose the people who work in our institutions at some point. What we're going to see is a population moving from the north and east to the west and south, which is going to change the politics of the nation. A majority of our population now lives in the red states. Cities to suburbs, we're seeing increasing isolation of populations that are poor, of color, and have few contacts and few prospects for mobility. They're coming from abroad, more languages, fewer English speakers at home. They're changing color, and the fastest growing groups are those with which our schools have been least successful. Economics, and this one's critical. We're shifting. And as we do it into this global digital information economy, low-end education jobs are disappearing, high-end education jobs are booming, and the result is states are raising standards for all of our kids. It's the highest levels in history. And they want, at the same time, higher graduation rates and fewer dropouts. The other point that's critical is that in this environment, industrial economies focus on process. That's why our schools look like assembly lines. 180 days, Carnegie units, age 5, till age whatever, 12 grades. The fact of the matter is, what we have is outcome variable, time constant education. In contrast, that focuses on teaching. In contrast, an information economy focused on outcomes, and it shifts. And the new emphasis on learning more than teaching. And so what we're seeing now is state standards, which are the Common Core increasingly, outcomes, testing regimes, more assessment, and none of those are going away. We need to know how students are doing. Relationship with government has changed. Government, I'm sure none of you have heard about this, but they're very critical of education schools. And what they're doing now is I addressed a group of foundations that was trying to figure out where to fund for teacher education. And I made the case I made to you at the beginning. At the end, one of the people sitting in the room got up and said, how many of you believe this, that you ought to fund ed schools? Not one hand went up in that room. That's what we're facing. Alternative routes are growing. Alternative providers are expanding quickly. School systems. New York State's allowing all kinds of providers now to offer teacher education, school leadership, and provide a master's degree. Fourth, privatization. Higher education is a great business. It's a long-term purchase. It's counter-cyclical. It's subsidized. It has dependable cash flow. It has quality questions. The private sector sees this increasingly as the next healthcare. And the fact is, they're going to invest heavily. Convergence of knowledge producers. Libraries, museums, zoos, universities, all are building things that look like courseware based upon content that they're producing. I went to visit a publisher. And Bill, how am I doing on time? Do I have a couple more minutes? I've got 5 minutes, okay. I went to visit a publisher, and I'm sitting in his empty room waiting for him, and I'm looking around the room. God, shelves and shelves and shelves of books. It was great. The guy comes out and says, you know, we're not in the book business anymore. And he says, we're in the knowledge business. And I think he saw me roll my eyes. And he said, let me give you an example even you can understand. We're in 12,000 schools. We're doing professional development, and we're doing pre-service. I thought, I was shocked. He now had my full attention. I was president of Teachers College. And I said, where are you getting your content from? And he said, we hire full-time content providers. I thought about that. I have no friends who are full-time content providers. My parents had no friends who were full-time content providers. And I asked what it was. I call them full-time content providers. He calls them full-time content providers. I call them professors. But I can't give stock options, and I can't give bonuses. What we're going to see then, I asked him one more question. What about credentials? And he said, we're still working on that. They're not anymore. They got degree granting approval. That's who we're facing. That's who's going to do the work if we don't do it and make ourselves relevant to what's going on. New technologies. I'm not going to go into it, but that's the wild card. It's going to change the world in ways that we can anticipate, but at a larger degree than we can imagine. Brain research. We're now learning how kids actually learn. Not the philosophy of education, but how do you actually teach kids successfully? And globalization. All of those are going to have a dramatic impact on what we do. There's going to be a proliferation of providers. They're going to be brick, they're going to be click, they're going to be brick and click. God, I like the sound of that. They're going to be individualized. There's going to be choice. We're going to see an increasing focus and shift from process to outcomes, credit to competencies, lifelong transcripts. So what do? The choices are reform or replace. We don't have a problem with messages, I've often heard. We're just not explaining this well enough to legislators. There's no message we can give. They don't want a message. They want to know that we're succeeding. They want to know that we can prove that there are consequences, that it affects kids' learning. Second, accreditation. CAPE is now developing new accreditation standards. We need for those to focus on learning if we're to have any credibility. Third, we need to move to outcomes. Fourth, we need to do real research on what we're accomplishing. Teach for America in the public eye is beating us to a pulp. And the reason is they do research and we don't on the consequences of our work. Last, we need to stop complaining. We don't like this, we don't like that, we don't like the tests. If you don't like it, change it. We should be the leading force in America for shaping education policy and education practice. And others have interceded because we haven't done the job. We need to change that. Thank you all very much.
Well, Arthur, thank you for that provocative beginning. Bill, I also want to thank you for the opportunity to raise this topic of changes in the future in education schools. And it's I could not think of colleagues that I would prefer to discuss this issue with other than Art and Kent. I'm really thinking that AERA is on a theme here with the theme this year relating education and poverty, asking what are those connections and what is our responsibility with regard to those connections. And I'm also thinking of last year's theme that translated loosely into do something with what you know. And I'm wondering if there isn't a bit of a provocation afoot within AERA that we need to be doing something with what we know. And so it is, I prefer to be provoked in that regard. And it's that attitude that I bring to the remarks that I'll share with you today, because it is an attitude of working with a group of providers struggling to do something with what we know to address many of the issues that Arthur has outlined very, very well, but also to get to the core of the matter and understand the industry that we now are in, this industry of developing the workforce for educational services in our communities. Now, I did not say the workforce for school districts in our communities. I said the workforce for educational services in our communities. That is really important because education is going to happen in lots of places and in lots of ways. And the need for those who can guide those services in truly professional ways, in ways that help the learner be particularly aware of what they know on the way to what they want to know will be important skills and attributes that will be highly valued in the marketplace for educational services. So my whole approach to this topic this afternoon is guided by what I see beginning to happen in schools of education that in fact gives me great hope. But it is also informed by the many challenges that I know we will confront along the way. For example, getting the clinical component is key. There is nothing more important, because it is through this clinical component that we must develop the skills and orientation to the reality of practice that every novice practitioner should take with them, along with a modicum of confidence. Not confidence that they can confront or will be able to address every single situation, because there will be some novel ones that they have not had a chance to engage, but the confidence that they know how to learn in their profession, and they know how to consult with others and the knowledge base that supports them to address those novel situations. It is the confidence of a professional and the confidence of a very competent learner. That is the model we want our new educators to take with them and carry with them, the ethic that we want them to share with all the students they will encounter. It is also in the clinical component that institutions will engage with their community to create partnerships that are all about getting done what that community values. It is well beyond placement of student teachers. It is confronting and owning issues of learning within your community and bringing to bear in that community all you have to offer to create solutions that are then tested in a way that is the research agenda, or an important component of the research agenda for any institution. Now, I'm describing things that I'm seeing that I see happening all across the country in the over almost 50 schools of education that have pledged a 100% match to federal dollars in a program we call the Teacher Quality Partnership Program. This is a program that has been zeroed out of every administration's budget since it was created now 8 years ago, and it is a program that has been maintained every year since it was created because of the advocates on the ground, the members of Congress who know the work that this program is doing and the benefit it is bringing to their communities. We seek to expand that effort. The other reason the clinical component is important is this is where you will measure the productivity of your work in the schools, colleges, or whatever provider of education, development of educators. This is where an assessment must be developed to document accurately, reliably, and with validity the skills and knowledge that have been developed in these candidates. And it's not simply skills and knowledge in and of themselves, it's the knowledge and skills and the attitude, the attributes necessary to support student achievement. There's a lot of talk about what educators, particularly teachers, need to know in the disciplines. It's a really, really important question. As we have worked together to design an assessment, as I have described, we've worked hard on a new construct that we call academic language. This is the language of the discipline that must be mastered by the educator so that that educator can help every student understand the concepts in the discipline and why those concepts are important in the life of the student. It is knowing beyond recall of the extant concepts and facts in the discipline. It is knowing the structure of the discipline, how to use it, and how to make it useful to the student. Now, these things are all going on, and it is really encouraging. It is very inspiring, frankly, to the leader of one might call the trade association for the providers. But these dynamics do not assure the future of teacher education in colleges of education. What will assure the future is the nature and quality of the research. It is that research agenda connected to the community, connected to the profession, and connected to our disciplines that will assure our future. So I would have to say, Bill, will schools and colleges of education continue? I think the real answer is it depends. But it depends on us doing something that needs doing with all that we know. Look forward to your discussion later. Thank you.
Well, Bill, thank you for for having me. I promise I won't leave SEF right away. I am a recovering dean. And so I need, in full disclosure, to say that. It turns out it takes several years to come fully to terms with what you learned, what you tried to do and accomplish, and what you didn't. And I'm not sure if this session is therapeutic, for me, or punishment, but we'll see. Look, I had a great 7.5, 8 years at Temple. I think ed schools are great places, many of them. They have great people in them, faculty, staff, and students. And they're trying to do great things. But I would often try to say to my faculty colleagues that our future is not promised. That in fact what we need to do is secure our futures. And I think much of what you heard Art and Sharon say were comments about ways to think about how to secure that future. I actually wanted to, in very brief order, look back instead of forward and see if there's anything about the history of ed schools that we should be aware of as we think about the future. And here's what occurred to me when I tried to do that. Number one, turns out teacher education is not the main thing, or certainly not the only thing ed schools do, but it is the main thing ed schools are known for doing. I can't tell you how many faculty meetings in which I was trying to recruit the other departments, ed psych, urban education, and the like. I said, look, you guys need to be interested in teacher preparation because our license to do these other things is all wrapped up in how well we do the teacher business, because that's what anybody knows, that we do. The public doesn't see the other stuff. The legislators don't see the other stuff. It's not even what superintendents and practitioners see. And, we're really cutting our nose off to spite our face if we don't recognize what these important constituencies see. And we make it very hard on ourselves to the extent that our research norms have us talk about what we do with a lot of skepticism. And our research norms cause us to break problems up. We're very good at deconstructing things. We're not so good at constructing things. I would say to my colleagues, we are so effective at taking Humpty Dumpty apart. Well, we don't know a lot about how to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. We're not even interested in that. But to be not interested in it is, I think, at our peril. That's the point I want to make. You don't get tenure. You don't get tenure by putting Humpty Dumpty back together again. That's something I hope we talk a little bit about when we get to Q&A. Third point, ed schools have been under long-standing pressure to prepare large numbers of people. Save for a few boutiques, I used to think, I still think, of the University of Penn, the Graduate School of Education there, as a boutique. I had one department that was larger than the entire graduate school. It just speaks to a different set of expectations held for the larger regional public enterprises. But the larger the scale, the less selective you are, the lower our status, other things being equal. That's part of our history that we need to pay attention to. Number 3, internal competition for quality of students. If it weren't bad enough we got outside competition, there's the rest of the university, competing for the best students. Modern research universities, we have to remember, have been built in large measure off the backs of ed schools and the normal schools that preceded them. At Temple, think about it. There's now a College of Liberal Arts. There's a very nice art school, great music school, and a new school of science and technology. All of them spliced off of a very large and prominent college of education, which 25 years ago was 2.5 times its current size, both in terms of students and faculty. So that's how the university invented itself or reinvented itself. And even today, the College of Education does not control admissions to its undergraduate programs. University decides how many students it's going to have. It decides which students the ed school is going to get after it decides which students the other colleges are going to get. So, and all of this is appreciated in the context of the country's preoccupation with status. Think about it. So we have this highly stratified education system in this country with ed schools historically and legitimately taking pride in serving who? Women, working class people, and minorities, none of whom have enjoyed much status, in this country. So a lot of heavy lifting. We're going to have to turn this into something powerful and remarkably come up with a narrative. TFA have stolen the social justice narrative. Very compelling, how they do that. So all I'm really saying is that I think the future of our ed schools is all wrapped up in understanding our past. And if we don't understand that history, as we think about how to innovate and embrace the future, some of these things and some of these patterns might well continue to hamper progress. I have two other things to say, two other observations to make, Bill, because there are a couple of things that are different, which I think surfaced in Art and Sharon's remarks. One, there is a very different marketplace in higher education today than we've seen ever before. To include competition from many sources, as Art suggested, for-profits, not-for-profit social movements like TFA, new startups backed with venture capital from Wall Street and private philanthropy, and even school districts themselves. You can leave this hotel, you could walk over to Howard Street and go down the block. The guy who created Lotus is setting up a university on the second floor of a little kind of warehouse. They're going to bring to market a degree for $3,000, big data, real-time feedback. I've seen it. You could pull up their website on your iPad. You would think you were interacting with Facebook. But every time a student takes a course, answers a question on an assessment, they've got a data set capturing what that student knows, doesn't know. They know how much time they spent studying. They know what they got right, they got wrong. And they've got a VP from SAS manipulating that data set. And they turn right around and they refine their curriculum modules. And they don't wait annually to decide whose students they're going to take or mostly not take, like my colleagues did. They'll enroll you continuously, right? So it's a very different marketplace. The other thing that's different is this performance-oriented policy climate in which we now live, where a fairly limited range of outcomes are now increasingly imposed, like linking student achievement scores to the preparing institution. So we have to be concerned not just with teaching and certification, but with learning outcomes and their measurement and the like. Apart from this, everything's going swimmingly well. All right?
Well, on that cheery note, why don't we jump forward? Let's say it's 2025. 80% at the moment, 80% of AERA's 25,000 members work in schools, colleges, or departments of education. So let's go forward to 2025, and I'd like your sense from each of you what you're thinking in terms of what will the mission of schools and colleges of education be in 2025? How will they have changed, or will they not have changed at all? Maybe that's the first way to begin. And just however you want to answer.
One way to think about 2025 is to see schools and colleges of education as embracing with a high degree of pride something one of your colleagues calls the careful teaching of pedagogy. The teaching how people learn as the real hallmark of their work, and their scholarship is anchored in real problems of practice, to the extent that there is every university has a really organic relationship with practitioners that will range from the conceptual to the practical, from scholarship that is highly conceptual to that which is highly organic and connected with real close-up evaluation studies. And all of this will be anchored by a profession that is aware of a structured research agenda that gears to that is responsive to how people learn. That's my romantic view, and the one I would love to see materialize.
Oh, thank you. I think it really depends upon us. It's what we manage to accomplish in the next few years. I think there is some chance that if we keep going the way we're going, we could lose our franchise. And we'll see fewer and fewer and fewer schools of education. On the other hand, if you ask me to imagine it, 2025 sounds like a long time away. It's only 12 years, which is shocking. And what stands out for me, if I were guessing, I think we're moving quickly in the direction of reinventing schools. And we're going to see schools, I think, that increasingly are outcome-based, that are individualized, that have teachers in new kinds of roles, that are time variable. And I think that's going to come rather quickly. We can see lots of experiments in doing that. So we'll be asked to prepare a new breed of professional for new kinds of schools. And what I bet is, that's what I expect education schools to become professional schools, in the same way that business schools are, law schools are, and nursing schools are. I think the other kinds of work that we do in research will follow Jane Addams' maxim. Jane Addams said that the field of social work needs to have 1 foot in the library and 1 foot in the schools. In the street, excuse me. 1 foot in the library and 1 foot in the streets. I think increasingly we are going to be asked to engage in research which meets both of those criteria. It'll be research that's far more policy and practice oriented than what we have now. So I guess what I'm talking about is a more stripped down version of what education schools look like, higher focus and concentration on the professions, and research tied to the real issues in policy and practice in the field. Other subject areas, I think, will migrate to the arts and sciences and other fields.
In the interest of time, I won't add very much of that. I think Art said essentially what I would say.
Let's talk about teacher ed for the moment. And two thoughts here. One is Arthur's comment just now about time. You know, some years ago I was president of the Faculty Senate at USC, and former presidents are sometimes asked by the current president to have a meeting. And I got one of those exclamation point emails in January, about a year ago, and said, the president needs to have an emergency meeting. Please tell us when you're available. And the secretary had put down times to meet in April. And that is sort of the way academics work, is our emergency in January, maybe you're available in April or May. Now, I also work in a school, Kent mentioned a boutique school of education, and at one point in time, we sort of paralleled Penn. We now have an online MAT program where there are about 2,000 online students, and it's not simply changed the online MAT, but it has changed everything in the school. Governance, the nature of full-time faculty, part-time faculty, tenure faculty, non-tenure track faculty, who are we hiring next, those sorts of things. So my question is, right now, teacher education is primarily in the domain of schools of education. And will that remain true? And if not, is there anything that schools of ed should do to make that happen? Or maybe it's a good thing.
Well, I'll think out loud about that. Who knows? But I think it is realistic to expect some number of things to happen. In some places, ed schools might get merged into larger units. Schools inside of colleges, departments inside of schools. In other places, we might expect the most valued programs to get siphoned off. Ed Psych, integrated into psychology departments. Math and science majors kind of handed over to the science and technology units on campus, maybe with a small certification unit to handle the field of, these kinds of things are going to happen because one thing that's already happening is that the onset of internal program review. Even the universities are businesses. They're into big data too. And they're going to come with a set of metrics about, where outcomes are being generated, either in preparation programs and or in research. And lots of judgments will get made as these larger universities decide where their profit centers really are, where their prestige is really located, and where they have the greatest likelihood of competing for the students and faculty, that they want. So I would predict we'd see a range of responses as a function of all of those kinds of things, to where inside this 12-year period of time, something called teacher education or the core business of ed schools, occurs.
I described earlier that Woodrow Wilson Foundation is doing a set of state teaching fellowships. The goal is to attract very able people, take a master's degree, and then teach in high-need schools. The universities agree to change their programs along directions that were talked about earlier in the STEM area. By the way, we have one of the project directors from Eastern Michigan sitting in the second row, but be that as it may, one of the issues that pertains to this is one of our 22 schools was really having a very hard time getting the education school to work with their School of Science. In the end, the president threw up her hands and transferred the entire program to the School of Science, so that they are now doing STEM teacher education. And I'm seeing that at any number of universities around the country. And that's the danger we're facing. Confidence is at such a level, people are very willing to make changes, sometimes wise, sometimes not.
I think, but Art and Kent have kind of described the moment that is upon us. And the moment is innovate or there will be a workaround. And as soon as there is a workaround, the extant unit will at some moment be obsolete. We are hearing more and more about schools of education knowing a lot and having a lot of passion, even on the social justice and passion for learning. But there is no passion for change. And there's no real zeal for taking on, trying to do this. You know, I challenge my folks every day. Can we do this faster, cheaper, and better? All three. That is the formula. And every enterprise in our economy is challenged in exactly that way. And schools of education don't get a pass. So I feel that the urgency really is to embrace this opportunity to do it faster, cheaper, and better. And, you know, as we become a professional school, perhaps we will also understand that our customers for our research are not other researchers. Our customers are those people who will benefit from what we find, from what we are learning, because it will be put to work on their behalf. Our students in schools, the parents who will who will make informed decisions or not, and educators who will become practitioners in the enterprise. So it is, you know, I think as we embrace this very important metaphor of a professional school, rather than a hybrid or some manifestation of the old academy, we perhaps will find some guidance into the kind of innovation that is urgently needed. The only problem, we don't have a whole lot of time to figure this out. So some of us are going to have to hold hands and trust each other and get started.
Let's talk about tenure for a second. So in research that I've done, you know, tenure we know is at the moment is the academic coin of the realm. At the same time, we also know there are more contingent faculty being hired now, more non-tenure track faculty throughout the country. We also know that in terms of rewards, such that there are, faculty are rewarded more for the research they do than teaching or service. And that's not talking about across institutions, it's within institutions, except at community colleges. So will research remain a priority for schools of education? And if it does, what are the implications? And if it doesn't, what's going to take its place?
Well, let me say a couple things. I do think that the future of ed schools is all wrapped up in running toward the profession that they support, not away from them. Although that is, you know, not what we do. You know, we think we have to run away from it. But, you know, the good news, ironically, is that there is this big profession. It isn't going anywhere. And there's a lot of cover and safety in running toward it, not away from it. Now, that I think means that has pretty substantial implications for research. So let me just return to my Humpty Dumpty point I tried to make a little bit earlier. If we can't get ourselves increasingly interested in trying to surround and attack in systematic ways the small number of really big problems that the profession is trying to deal with, and then go after those, you know, vigorously, then I think we've kind of sealed our own coffin. And we can look forward to people approaching these same questions less rigorously and in ways that we might not appreciate. Well, what does that mean for tenure? I don't think we're in a world where we're going to see the supply of tenure track positions sort of increase substantially. I do think we'll see expectations for those faculty shift over time, right? I expect that administrators will be looking for more, not less, flexibility in a world where they don't think it's smart to make long-term commitments when it's unclear how the contours of knowledge production might shift. You know, disciplines change, the problems. So for all those reasons, I don't expect growth in tenure. I do expect tenured faculty to be spread more variously across more students, class size going up, not down, for that kind of person. I do expect them to play quasi-management roles, research management, curriculum and program design, program review. There'll be a set of highly customized roles that they'll play in order to strike a different balance between the, quote, research faculty and other kinds of personnel and expertise that these schools are going to need to bring on board in order to produce the things they're going to need to produce.
You know, I think that the process of peer review is a really important value in knowledge production. And for that reason, I feel it's necessary to preserve tenure within educator preparation, within the schools of education, within that discipline, because we want to maintain high integrity in the scholarship and the production of scholarship. I do believe that we are going to have to kind of expand our appreciation for what is scholarship in order to be a real profession. And that means we are that 1 foot in the street and 1 foot in the library. It is, that's no joke. But we're going to have to be organized in how we engage with the field so that we can understand with practitioner colleagues what are the problems of practice, and we can engage with those colleagues to structure really strong methodologies for unpacking them and putting them back together in solutions that are designed in collaboration with the field. That's how a real profession works. And we would then, in fact, create some allies in those schools out there who can tell the policymakers what we do that is worth keeping. So, I mean, frankly, until we have the voice of what should be satisfied customers, extolling the virtue and the importance of research, we run the risk of losing the franchise to conduct the research, because these questions are of interest to a number of disciplines, and there are a number of disciplines that would have the methodologies to approach them and perhaps are even more accustomed to working in the field. I'm going to just mention one little experiment that I think is really important. The Strategic Education Research Partnership idea that came out of the National Academy of Sciences as a result of the How People Learn work. The notion was, really the analogy was the field testing that's done in agriculture. To have an organized way to test different interventions in different settings so that you can carefully document what works, when it works, what are the indicators that it's not working, what are the indicators that it is working, when should you pull the plug. And it's the documentation of these interventions that becomes the result, the important result, not a conclusive finding that this always works, because there's very little like that. But it is the careful documentation that's organized and maintained across different kinds of settings. This is being attempted not within our colleges of education, but within a small little organization that's working on behalf of school districts, under contract with school districts. Now, why should we not have that same kind of arrangement with schools of education to help figure out what is working, what are the interventions that will address the problems of practice unique to this setting?
I think research will change, and not just in our world. It's going to have to change. We live in an age of instant information. And if you do research today, the odds are good that your article will be out in 2 years. That doesn't work today anymore. And we're going to have to find a new model. Maybe it's post-review. But there are a lot of ways to get it out. I did a series of reports on education schools. And I didn't want to wait for a publisher. That would have been several years later. So we simply put them online. And in the first week, 66,000 copies were downloaded. Now, I got to tell you, I have no book in my history that's ever sold that number of copies. It may be true that all the books I've ever written together haven't sold 66,000 copies. But the reality is we have new means of dissemination, new time schedules, and they're going to affect us. We also have one other issue with regard to research. I did a study a few years ago on mean citation rates, for articles. The modal citation rate is 0 to 1. Tell me how important that research is if it's only being cited by one other person. I think it's going to matter, the kind of research that we do and how germane it is. I don't know when I've been to a gathering like this one in which we haven't decried high-stakes testing. Why haven't we invented something else? It's going to change. We can all imagine how it's going to look. It's going to be more like your GPS. Why aren't we inventing it? Why is it going to come from someplace else? That's important research. Tenure. I think with tenure, what's likely to happen, I wrote an article a few years ago, and what it said was, look, you got to change one of two things. You either have to establish a retirement age, or alternatively, you have to limit the length of tenure. When I was at Teachers College, we were doing buyouts for 73-year-olds called early retirement. Fact of the matter is, people don't leave. They stay forever. You wheel them in on a cart, and they're still teaching. That's got to change. Or we're not going to have room for vibrant new minds in the academy. The other thing that's happening at the same time is I don't think MOOCs are going to be more than a footnote in the history of higher education. But I think they symbolize something very, very important. If we have a class with 100,000 students in it, what's more important, my name and the fact that I'm teaching 100,000 students, or the fact that I'm coming out of Stanford? It's the talent that's going to matter. And I think we're going to see the same thing happen in academia that happened in Hollywood. Once upon a time, studios dominated the landscape, and actors worked for them. When was the last time you went to a movie because you liked the studio? Talent runs Hollywood. And what's going to happen is, I suspect the same thing is going to happen in higher education. Our top professors, people who can get 20,000 people in a class, aren't going to need tenure. What they're going to need is an agent. A person who can get them a contract, teaching a course at a university, doing a MOOC, doing a TV show, writing, consulting. I think we're going to see that sort of thing happen with our top talent. The other thing on tenure, last comment, I don't think tenure is a very powerful thing in terms of its impact on higher education. I don't think for most people it allows them to do research they wouldn't do otherwise. And I offer 3 examples. One is, if tomorrow you decided you want to do research on the profound difference that genetics make between Canadians and Americans, could you do that? What if it got into race or gender? There are topics you can't do whether you have tenure or not. Second, when there has been tenure and the world has changed in ways that were deleterious, during the McCarthy era, they fired tenured professors right and left. We have done that historically, so that tenure provides no protection. Few of us use it for controversial research. and it leaves a lot of dead wood on our campuses for very long times.
Art, I just wanted to let you know that I had a moment in which several of my colleagues retired, and the mean age of the faculty went up.
Let me ask one other question, and then let's open it up for questions from all of you folks. Let's assume that there's somebody sitting out there who is about to become a dean of education in a school or college. What would you say is we can only focus on so many things. What would you say is the single greatest problem facing schools of ed today, and what are you going to tell him or her to do? How can it be fixed?
Let me do this one just real quick. I think this is a great time to be a dean. I think it's a fantastic time. Deans have never had a chance, to the degree today that's possible, to put their stamp on the future of education and education schools. I'm not saying it's easy, but they can do it. And I'd suggest doing two things. The first is in 1828, the state of Connecticut criticized Yale College for offering a curriculum that focused on the trivium and quadrivium as we moved into the Industrial Revolution. Yale did what universities do whenever we're in trouble. They formed a committee that issued a report. And the report said, should we change a lot or should we change a little? And the report concluded, it's the wrong question. The right question is, what's the purpose of a university or college? The right question is, what's the purpose of your education school? And the other thing a dean ought to do is scare the hell out of the faculty by telling them the truth about what we're facing, what the challenges are, and the work ahead. And then begin the task of working together to think about what the future of our education school needs to be.
Well, Art, I agree with you. I think the biggest short-run challenge is the inertia and the pace of change. You have to tell the faculty, and you have to tell the faculty again, and then probably tell them, again. But I also think the moment in which there's such tension and light generated on these very institutions is the best time to be in the job, because you can use this external pressure opportunistically. You can say, well, the devil's making me do this, if need be. But I think in crisis is real opportunity if the person in the job chooses to view it that way and behaves to seize those opportunities. And I think the faculty are by design entrepreneurs, and if you approach them in that spirit, they will come along, and then who knows what you can do. You can get a lot done.
I think this would be an exciting time to be a new dean, with one proviso. In negotiating that contract, I think it should be, the understanding must be established with the institutional leadership that you've got to get engaged with the community in a really in-depth, intimate way. And that's the message of directed entrepreneurship that I would bring to the faculty. It is entrepreneurship that invites you to offer the best that you have to create higher quality educational services to the citizens of your community. Because the customers that you want speaking the loudest are those closest to home. And that will ensure the future of your College of Education far beyond exalted research, though it will be important, and I certainly hope that happens as well. But if you are not known to the people at home, you will have had a failed leadership opportunity and a lost opportunity to create the future of the colleges of education that we really need.
Questions? Can you go to the mic so that they're recording this so that you can get it?
Let
Hi.
me ask a favor. Can people give their names and what they do for a living?
Yeah.
And tell some intimate secret?
Tom Reeves, Professor Emeritus, University of Georgia. I've been at Georgia for 30 years. When I went to Georgia, the state was 49th in educational indicators, and we're now 48th in the country. So I could say, arguably, my career has had very little impact. On Sunday, Kaplan had a special event here, and they invited one of the speakers was from Silicon Valley, a billionaire investor, and they asked him why people aren't investing in educational innovation. And he said, well, you lack metrics. And one of the metrics he said was, we need a return on education metrics, which I think some of you may have been touching on. But the real elephant in the room, and you touched on it with the tenure question, but it's the tenure system, the tenure. We still are evaluating people on their participation at AERA and their publication in all those journals we see up on the third floor of this building. Most of those, frankly, 80% of this is crap. At least 80%, maybe more. I went to 12 years at Catholic school, and Sister Rita Alberta said, you need to be in the 10% of the world that's not crap. Well, I suspect 90% of what we publish in education and what we value is crap. And it's precious. It's our own little research agenda. And you can just go through and see title after title after title in this book and in those journals of research that only serves the needs of the people who are building up their own careers. So what I would like to suggest is that we emulate the Thiele Fellowships. The Thiele Fellowships, it's called 20 Under 20. They take 20 young people a year and give them each $100,000 and tell them, we don't want you to go to college for 2 years. And you can take that $100,000 and work on your dream. And these are high school kids. Build on your dream. Don't go to college. Why don't we find, and AACTE could take leadership here and AERA, let's find 25 colleges of education that over the next 12 years would say, we don't want you going to AERA, we don't want you publishing in any journals.
Now, wait a second.
I'm serious. We don't want you. We want you to work on demonstrating impact, that you change the lives of kids in your state or in your region or in your city, and really judge people on their return on education rather than just their visas. Thank you.
That's a interesting idea. In fact, we're collecting vignettes from the grantees with the Teacher Quality Partnership grants, helping them document with more precision the impact that they're having at the local community level on student achievement. Now, this has been a real effort. It's painstaking because folks want to talk about the process and not the impact. And we are really getting them back to talk about the impact. And why are we doing this? We're doing this because I fear the officially sanctioned evaluation research will have a bias that ignores some of the impact that we know to be happening in these local communities. And that we want to make sure that while other evaluations will occur, we will be able to evaluate ourselves as a professional community based on outcomes. This is a discipline that we must really take seriously, and hopefully we'll gain more and more confidence and competence at coming to a consensus around some of these outcome measures. And the final thing I'm going to say is that as a profession, we must become very skilled at coming together around important controversial issues, understanding the best that we know right now, and being willing to act on that until we get additional information rather than to continue to upbraid one another, and hold us back from acting until we know all things. That is not the way to innovation. When you innovate, you version, you try this and you test it and you get better and better with each iteration. But we've got to embrace those principles and that courage and that devotion to outcomes.
Nor is it the way to garner public support or political support or resources. You know, Bill, the story you should have told when you introduced me was, it seems like every place you've been stopped doing what they were doing after you were there, right? The Lilly Endowment said, we're not doing any more education. And Pew decided to become an operating foundation. OERI got turned into IES. You know, the story goes on, right? But when I went up on the Hill to ask for money, the first pushback I got was, you guys don't agree about anything. All you do is argue in public. It can't be the case that you don't know anything at all. So we really block and tackle in such ferocity. We sort of over-apply this culture of skepticism to our own detriment, rather than really amplifying the things that we do know. This is not unrelated to Humpty Dumpty. Our ability to disaggregate is way overdeveloped. Our ability to aggregate up into a few compelling truths is underdeveloped. And I think if we don't get that figured out, which is a leadership issue, and the faculty have to learn how to follow each other, play with each other, or this will undermine our credibility.
Can you come up?
Send him back. We don't do this.
What's the matter?
Any questions?
My name's Jim Colmus from EDGE, and you've been talking about redefining, rearranging the business model where revenues would come from someplace else and what have you. Can you create the Humpty Dumpty of what this new business model might look like in the future?
Who wants to talk about that?
I think he was asking you.
You think he was asking me? Yeah. Well, okay. In instruction, one of the things we have to ask ourselves, does everything take a semester to do? Right? Does everything take a year to do? Right? Another thing we have to ask ourselves, is it the sole province of one faculty member, the teaching of this particular thing? Let me just put it in the form of an example. So imagine you're trying to build a program that's actually for people in field settings, making decisions. And the problem that they need to get good at solving doesn't map neatly onto the knowledge base of a single faculty member, or even a single department or program. Suppose you've got to go over to political science, and then over to economics, and maybe over to the law school in order to build up this set of experiences that actually helps this educational leader in field settings solve one of these problems. But then you might need to modularize that course. I might need 10 days of somebody who knows HR in the business community, school. I might need 2 weeks of somebody in the law school. But how I conceive of that course, that program, what a culminating degree is it a dissertation? Is it something else? That's what I mean by rethinking the business model. We've actually got to figure out how to speed the process up, improve the quality, and take the price down all at the same time. Some of the expertise might not even be inside the university, but we can't be afraid to go outside the university to find that expertise if that's where it is. So that's just one example. I could talk about a research one too, but I won't.
Let me try a model. And I'll offer it now. I have no reason to believe I'll believe it's a good model tomorrow, or even in an hour. And by the way, my heart was just broken. I thought somebody was tweeting how good this session was, and more people kept coming.
This has nothing to do with us.
What would happen if? What would happen if we changed the fundamental customer? The customer to education schools is the student. What would happen if we made the customer the school district for teacher education? And what we said was, we're going to offer a competency-based curriculum. And the goal is for the school districts to think, these are the best possible teachers we have ever seen. We're going to give preferential hiring to whoever comes out of this ed school. And then because it's competency-based, we're talking about something that looks like stacking courses. And it turns out stacking can be broken into all kinds of competencies. And it provides a possibility of offering professional development. So not only in the business of preparing teachers the best, we're also in the business of doing the best upskilling of people already in the teacher force. It's a very different model of professional development. It's a very different model of education in school.
And in fact, in developing these partnerships, I believe that it's going to be incumbent on the schools of education to embrace the function of onboarding novice practitioners, because school districts can't do it, and that is the only way we're ever going to reduce the demand for new teachers so that we can focus on developing more rigor in the entire process of educator preparation. I mean, as long as the heavy demand is on a large number of brand new practitioners, you have a weak point in the system that really will not promise maturation over time. It's a trap. It's like quicksand. So we've got to work with districts to make sure that they are putting the novice practitioners to the best possible use, and thereby reducing the need for new practitioners.
I'd like to ask a question, then we need to break. So I'm all for rethinking the business model, and I appreciate that every single class doesn't have to be a semester long and all that. So I appreciate that all these changes need to happen, and I appreciate that tenure is an issue. The thing I wonder about is tenure came about not as job security, but as the protection of academic freedom. And there have been, in my own life, at least 3 times at Penn State and at least 2 times at USC, that if I didn't have tenure, I wouldn't be around. And you may say, in the course of 25 years, Bill, 5 examples, that's not a lot, but I've used that all the time. And I've used it not only for myself, but I've used it for others who are on the tenure track. And I just wonder, so what are we saying here about academic freedom? Are we saying, well, too bad, we got to change, we got to get with it, or what? And I don't think simply a 5-year, here's your contract for 5 years, and that's equivalent to tenure. So what are we saying?
Given all the various perspectives and levels of expertise that we have in our business, doing our business, and sometimes with far more influence than we have on our business, perhaps we don't want to, now is not the moment to give up tenure as a means of creating a license for academic freedom. But it is also not to be used as creating a barrier to organizational development to the extent that resources are being used in a way that is no longer productive. So I believe that with tenure should come some expectations of continued productivity that warrants continued application of tenure. I mean, if you're sitting there with scholarship that's 20 years old, that was quite renowned in its day, but not necessarily refreshed. I mean, is that a tenured position? That position doesn't seem to be producing much controversy. And so why then is academic freedom freedom of speech is something that we should cherish and value and protect by all means that we have at our disposal. But it should not be used, tenure in higher ed, tenure in K-12, it must not be used to protect against measures of productivity that are required of modern organizations. We simply cannot afford it, and it will not be tolerated.
Okay. Thank you very much, and give the folks a round of applause.
Thank you.